Christian parenting. So, you're having a baby. Again. Today, we're talking about going from 1 kid to 2, or maybe you're going to 3 or 4.
Whoa. Slow down there. Rachel, I really need you not to get any ideas in this conversation as we try to help people expand their families well. And for those of you who you know who you are that are listening to this that have more than 2 kids, you're further from henceforth restrained from speaking with my wife because I'm ready. We locked it in. We're done. We knocked it out of the park. Let's.
We'll see.
The expansion has taken place.
Anyways, so today we're going to talk about the chaos. I feel like that's an appropriate word of expanding your family and having multiple children at the same time living in your home, because that is a whole other ballgame, and we recognize that many of our listeners are not always first-time parents. And so we could say that this transition, going from 1 kid to 2 kids, was just as big of a life change as having your first baby.
And so today we're going to unpack first a little bit of the craziness and challenges that come with expanding your family and some of our experiences there. And then we're going to talk about things we love about our expanding family. We're not do that a ton, we want to limit that section. But we will talk about that some.
Too much.
And then the last piece is we're going to offer some practical help for things we learned often the hard way, lessons we learned about going from 1 to 2. And so excited for the conversation today. As always, thanks for listening. We're so glad you're here and hope that today's conversation helps. All right, so first, we're going to unpack a little bit of the craziness and the challenges of going from 1 kids to 2 or a general expanding family. And there's things we could do here to start. We could share things like scripture or, do something super spiritual. But I think we should start with some Ray Romano.
We don't want to talk about our quiver being full.
That's a great... Maybe we should, Rachel. Would you like to speak about that concept today? Okay. I don't feel equipped today. Didn't sleep well last night. Let's dive into those concepts. So Ray Romano seems to be the right fit. So I love this concept that illustrates a little bit of the craziness of having kids in general. But I think undergirding both of these quotes is we're laughing too much. Undergirding. It's a good word.
Sorry, everyone.
It's a good word. Is the reality that the more kids you have, I think just the more true these quotes are. So they're true with 1 kid, but they're just more true with more than 1 kid. So this first quote that I love says, everyone should have kids. They're the greatest joy in the world, but they're also terrorists. Mm-hmm. And you realize this as soon as they're born and they start using sleep deprivation to break you. Talk a little bit about sleep deprivation today, going from 1 kids to 2, but it is true. So many of the tactics I feel like that our kids use against us, they must have learned from some terrorist playbook somewhere.
I feel like break you is like a really good way to put it as
I'm
well.
broken. I'm broken.
I feel like they break me on a regular basis every hour.
Absolutely. Like I thought there's no pieces left to break. Like they're all too small, but they seem to find those ones and go right in on them.
Yeah. My favorite Ray Romano quote, we found all of these quotes when we were writing our workbook. But mine was, having children is like living in a frat house. Nobody sleeps, everything's broken, and there's a lot of throwing up.
And just now, as we found this quote again, we were remembering this time we were just all eating breakfast.
Literally.
And Wes, I don't remember how old he was. Do you remember?
3 probably.
And he just throws up at the breakfast table.
We're
just eating. And just no warning, and it was just everywhere.
On our brand new West Elm dining table, and it went into the crevices because it's one that you can expand, and so I think there's still leftover throw up, just it's residue unreal. Deep down.
Yeah. Pro tip would be don't buy anything with crevices in it. Just a general rule with kids. It's not a helpful reality with little ones. They'll find
That's really
something
true,
to stick
though.
in there. Our couch, cars, there's no crevice that doesn't have some
goldfish
that our kids haven't somehow found something to stick in there.
I vacuumed out my car yesterday because we're taking our kids to our in-laws this weekend, and I was like, oh, I'm going to have to vacuum this thing out. If she's keeping my car for the weekend, there's no way she can see the disgusting level of crumb debris. It was just debris everywhere.
Yeah, it's like no reason our kids are hungry all the time is because like so much of their food does not end up in their body. Like the majority. It has to be the majority of the food.
That's a really good point.
So let's dive in here a little bit. Rachel, maybe if you want to kick it off for us, what was your personal hardest thing going from one kid to two?
My gut reaction is like having to take care of a newborn baby, which is already so challenging and exhausting, but also a toddler at the same time. Wes was, I think, 2 and 3 months, which we always said we wanted them close together. And I think a lot of people feel that way. Some people would say we're crazy. We slightly are. Obviously, you can tell by the last few minutes of this podcast. But all the while, you're dealing with this postpartum hormone change that is just radical and insane anyways. And so it's like, yeah, I'm taking care of a newborn. I'm not sleeping. You're doing the every 3-hour feedings. You're trying to like take naps during the day. But guess what? Now you can't take naps during the day because now you have a baby or a toddler to take care of too. So I think that was like just the experience postpartum is so different after having kids than it is with your first. Like with Wesley, I was able to like lounge around the house and nurse while I'm watching a show and just chill and really take it easy. And you can do that whole thing where they say sleep when the baby sleeps. You can do that when it's your first. When it's your second and you have a toddler running around or whatever, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, whatever your story is, you don't get to just take a nap mid-morning anymore. And I think that is a really challenging part of it because you're not sleeping very well or very much at night. And then obviously loading on the postpartum hormone change and breastfeeding and just your hormones are everywhere. So it's really hard to regulate your emotions and your mood. And it's just a lot. What about you, Craig? What was the hardest thing for you in that whole transition?
Man, I really resonate with everything you just said. That is a real tough reality. Even as the dad, the lack of availability for napping because you have that kid that's
gosh.
that's like game time for them. I think my hardest thing was, not just symptomatic of going from one kid to two, but that was the main change. But I think at least for me in that stage of life when we had Wells, it just felt like all of life was expanding. It's like work was expanding a lot.
Yeah.
I was just passing, like 30. And that was like a marker to kind of go from your 20s to your 30s. And that's part of my story. But then work expansion and family expansion. And not to mention like Wes was growing a lot. Like those development stages of having a toddler versus a baby are so different. Mm-hmm. And we're learning how to parent a toddler while we're also taking care of a newborn, which was, while we had some more confidence about that with our previous experience, each kid's different too. And so it's like you're learning how to parent not just a newborn, but Wells specifically, while I'm trying to figure out, this toddler that's starting in daycare.
Going from 2 to 3 it's like watching your kid, like your baby turn into a kid.
Yeah.
And it's really a strange
Yeah. And they're talking
journey.
and asking questions
Mm-hmm.
and they're talking constantly.
Constantly.
And so there's and they're listening constantly. So we started realizing oh man, we need to really change the way that we speak.
Up.
Yeah, kind of button up that language a little bit. And so many elements of just having a toddler for the first time was tough all by itself, let alone that family expansion. And, Wes, me just being the dad, he really wanted me to really play with him, kind of rough, he wants to run around outside and do a lot of physical activities. And his favorite thing is running and jumping into my arms with me, throwing him across our, king bed, and so and just over and over and over again. And that wasn't, normal. The stuff we do with Wes was going on a walk, and maybe he would walk around a park and I just kind of make sure he didn't die, and now he wants me to run with them. So the physicality for me and for both of us, playing with a toddler is just very different. And a kid that gets older and older, and that's just more and more now, going from 1 to 2 kids too. I spend most of my days after work are spent outside, doing something with them that's active, which is good, but hard as well, as I'm kind of tired. And so I think that was probably the hardest thing for me.
Yeah. I remember, because with your first kid, your world literally revolves around him. You can try really hard not to do that, but it's just the way it is. I think that's just a natural reaction to having your first baby. I mean, literally, the world hangs on everything that they do and say and feel. And whether they're upset or whether they're sick. And I remember really worrying. I remember the intense fear that I had, towards like 8-9 months pregnant with Wells of like, what is this going to do to Wesley? Like, is he going to have, I don't know. I consulted with so many of my friends I had a few friends who kind of in our little play group got pregnant really quick after their first. And I was just kind of like, what was this like for your firstborn? Like, how did they handle it? Like, were they so upset all the time? Were they just devastated they didn't get mommy's attention all the time? And that was like a very real thing for me that I was like, I'm going to be like trying to nurse Wells, and Wesley's going to want to be like up in my business, want me to hold him. And there were a lot of those moments, where I remember trying to nurse Wells and Wesley came up and he didn't remember nursing, but he came up and like tried to nurse on my shoulder. Like, it was so sweet and cute. But, I was just so concerned about like Wesley's emotional well-being going into it. And the fear, I think, really paralyzed me and kept me from even being excited or even enjoying just that process of, going from 1 to 2. And yeah, I feel like that was a really, really hard part of it for me in that transition. Okay, so we have talked about the really hard, really scary, really exhausting, really hilarious parts of going from 1 to 2. But we would be remiss if we didn't talk about all the amazing aspects of it and what we love about it so much. And so, Craig, maybe in this next section, why don't you tell us what you love about having 2 kids?
Oh man, there's so many things. I think what comes up for me first is, even just last night, our kids are like have the sweetest friendship at 4 and 2.
Yeah.
Like they are just buddies and they play all the time. And obviously they get in fights and, want the same toy constantly. And so there's frustrations with that, but their friendship really is so sweet. And even last night, they wanted to read a book together and Wells wanted to get in Wes's bed, which is lofted. So we like picked him up and stuck him up there and read this book to them. And they're just laughing. And then Wells does this thing right now where he like lays down and fake sleeps and snores like that's the sound that he makes.
So sweet.
Coming out of a little 2-year-old is so cute. And so he like laid down on Wes's pillow and was like doing his fake snore. And then Wes laid on top of him. And they just like, could tell they wanted to just keep hanging out.
Well, we were like, okay, Wells, it's bedtime. And he goes, okay, night-night, night-night. And it was like, I'm going to stay here. Thanks.
Yeah, so true. And so I think like while, having kids in general feels like the ups and downs of life. Come and go a lot faster, but they also get a lot higher, and lower at times. But like the ups get a lot bigger. And that addition of joy to our family, like I just love that expansion in our family. Like we laugh so much, even more. Like we started laughing, we laughed more when Wes was here, than we did before. There's so many fun, cute things. And there's so many funny things that he says. And now with 2 kids, that's just even more true. Like our family is expanded and I think our expansion of like love and joy and laughter has come with it. And I love that experience for our family. It's been a really beautiful thing.
Well, I think too, like even my fears that I had about Wes, it's amazing to watch your oldest kid, their heart expand and their worldview to expand, because it really does happen where, I can't tell you how many times we've had to tell Wes, hey buddy, the world does not revolve around you. Like this is not just your toy. This is not just your TV. I'm not just your mommy or, and like, cause I feel like he gets it now. Like I feel it's really cool to watch your kid go from mega self-absorbed toddler to like turning into a kid. He's 4.5 now. Almost 5, which I can't believe. And he really does have this like very real awareness of his brother and his brother's needs and his brother's wants and his brother's personality, and just wants to bring joy to his brother. And it's really incredible to watch even like the one that you were worried about and how they were going to handle it really experience true joy and true love in their life. It's just amazing. It's an amazing aspect of it to me.
That's so true. Yeah. Even, I think experiencing like the times that he has to decide for himself, like we ask him to share, we try to, step in if needed, but a lot of times we kind of have to try to help them, navigate those conversations themselves. But then you hear him being 4 and Wells being 2, he's doing a really great job of like kind of learning like, okay, I could bring calm to this scenario by giving Well, something that I actually want still, and is making that choice. He doesn't always make that choice, and he doesn't have to always make that choice. He doesn't have to, be the creator of calm in our house. It's
Right.
okay
Because
to,
Wells has to learn as
yeah,
well.
totally. But the times that he does choose that for himself, I think is a really sweet thing too. And it shows that he really is learning, not just that mom and dad make me share, but that I can, really genuinely meet a need of Wells because I want to in a healthy way in this moment. And that can be a positive experience for him. And I think I've seen him grow in empathy and joy, and grow in his experience of that relationship and investing in that relationship and seeing what comes out of it. And that's been really cool to see that that's kind of a start for him and for our family.
Yeah. And then when he does share, you get to hear the freaking cutest thing in the world when Wells says, "Thanks, Wes. You're the best."
That's so true. That's so true. Yeah, it's been really cute. Well, Rachel, what about you? What would you say is kind of the thing you love the most about having two kids?
Yeah. So it's funny because when we were kind of just planning where we wanted this conversation to go, I really felt immediately in my heart, Wells. Wells is my favorite part of having two kids, Like, I don't know, going into this, I really struggled and worried that I wouldn't love another kid the way that I loved Wesley because I just couldn't fathom it because I didn't know Wells. I didn't have him yet. And I remember thinking, gosh, can I do this? Can I love these two humans equally? I guess if that makes sense. You love them differently, but you love them equally because I'd never experienced a love like I had with Wes. I mean, I was just, and still am, so deeply in love with this little boy. And so I think I was worried that I wouldn't connect with Wells the way that I did with Wes, and that I would feel really guilty about her. I would feel like a horrible mom. And it's just amazing because he's my favorite part because I got to fall in love with another human and he is just the best. Wells is so funny and he's so loving and snuggly and strong-willed because they really are two different people.
Mm-hmm.
And so you're not duplicating this love that you have for your firstborn. You are falling in love with a whole other different person. And it is something that you really don't understand until they're here and until you start seeing their personality. Because even obviously with a newborn, you're like, it's hard to not love a newborn. They're perfect little angels. But when you really get to grow with this other person and be like, oh my gosh, this is so cool about your personality. This is so sweet about you. This is so funny about you. It's like, wow, I love that. That's my favorite part of it is and that's, I think, why I'm always open to having more.
Yeah.
Because I just imagine how special the next one would be and the next one and the next one, that sort of thing. And so I think that's what makes it so hard for me to be like, yeah, we're done. Because I'm like, oh, just imagine what the next one would be like. He or she could be so amazing. But
yeah, it's so true. I think one of the things that's come to mind for me as you say all of that is that it's really fun to have a very different relationship because they're two different people.
Right.
And so it's, it goes from this concept of going from one kids to two kids to actual human beings that have a personality and, have interest and things they enjoy and things they don't enjoy and ways they communicate, ways they hear things. And I think that's been a fun realization. With Wells, Wes is so accommodating and empathetic and very socially aware. And Wells is he just runs the house. I was looking the other day and
not accommodating.
Yeah, he's not accommodating so far. And I looked the other day and all of us were in the living room, and it's pandemic. And so there's not a lot of activities we can go out and do. And so we all had something we wanted to do, but we're sitting in the same room. And so I think I was watching golf on my phone. You were either reading or watching something on your phone. Wes had his iPad, and Wells was the one that had the whole TV to himself at
40
less than
TV.
2. Yeah, I'm watching. It's my house, right? It's our house. We're bringing home the bucks to have a house, and I'm resigned to watching golf on my tiny screen phone.
That's the perfect image of the second born ruling the house.
That's exactly what he does. And it's just fun to watch. I have to get on his level constantly. That's our relationship. With Wes, I have to get on his level in a totally different way. I need to mirror and I need to be really kind and empathetic and walk him through things because he's very already naturally really doesn't want to upset me or do something he shouldn't do.
Yeah. And
he gets really overwhelmed and upset when he finds out he did something wrong. And with Wells, it's I have to get on his level. He doesn't take to the same tone. It's
No.
He'll just bulldoze right over that statement. It's so cute and funny coming out of a tiny little body. When I discipline Wells, Wes gets usually like upset and he kind of like, cries and he wants to make sure we're okay. And Wells looks at me, like stares at me in the face, blank face, and he just clears things. Like he cleared the whole footstool of toys.
Yep.
Like it's terrifying. Like this 2-year-old is staring at me like square in the face and
Just
not
turning
budging.
tables.
Like he's not moving. His face is not moving. His expression's not changing. And he's throwing things and clearing whole tables and chairs and like causing total chaos. Like if you're going to discipline me, you have to get on this level. It's like what he's saying it too, which is so cute and like honestly so funny and has brought out a lot of things in me too, like as a parent. And
Yeah.
I have my own relationship with Wells that's so fun. Like I
Yeah.
love getting time just with him. And I love what you're saying, like this concept of going from 1 to 2 kids and things that you love is really about the people. Like it's about them as people and your family and the unique kids that God has given you and that relationship you develop. That's so beautiful and fun and life-giving.
I really love that. Like having like unique things that you do where I don't even know how to explain it. Like even ways that I tickle my 2 boys very differently, and play with them very differently. And I'll even kiss them differently because they want different things. And so just having like, even me and Wells, we have like our own little language and like we goof off in certain ways that it's like me and Wells have inside jokes and he's a 2-year-old. But I love that because there really are just 2 completely different people. And that is such a beautiful thing. And it's something that, like you were saying, that really resonates with me, this idea of it going from a concept to being like, oh yeah, you're a person.
All right, Rachel, well, let's talk about some practical help here. So we talked about, this is challenging. It's hard. Like it's really hard going from 1 to 2. It's also beautiful and so life-giving. It's like we couldn't imagine not having Wells, right? Like that's not even something I can even think about or imagine. It's been so wonderful. It's so clearly what God intended for us and something that we're loving. And so let's talk about maybe some practical tips we learned along the way. So Rachel, what would you say is the best practical tip you learned in going from 1 to 2?
Okay, so it was honestly one of the hardest seasons in our lives, in our marriage. I mean, we've alluded to that several different times, but, and Craig talks about this rapid expansion of responsibility. Craig's work life was at level 100. I mean, he was having to travel. I mean, things were rapidly expanding with the ministry, and he was promoted to CEO. And I mean, it was just all hands on deck. And then you're suddenly like with a 2-year-old and a newborn. And like I said, the hormones, I mean, it was nuts. Honestly, like with Wesley, I look back on it and I was like, you know what? I can handle this. And I handled it. And I went through really hard stuff with recovery and then and had help, the occasional help. And my mom was super present, thank God, because I don't know what I would have done without her. But this was like a whole new arena, if that makes sense. Like I was like, wait, this is a different level of struggle, of emotions. I honestly, when I look back, I think I don't know if I had postpartum depression, but I absolutely had baby blues because there would be some days where I literally couldn't stop crying because I felt like such a failure. I felt like I truly was drowning. And there are going to be days like that where you feel like you're drowning, and it's probably because you are. And so we've talked about this some on the First 15 podcast. It is very important that you learn to listen to what your body is telling you. It is very important that you learn to listen to your emotions and not just slap scripture over stuff, because especially in that season, it's very likely that you're going to be going through some really hard emotional and hormonal changes. And it took me way too long to raise my hand and to fight for my own mental and emotional health in that season. And so when you're drowning, it's time to ask for help. It's time to raise the white flag and say to your husband, to your parents, to your doctor, hey, I'm actually really struggling. This is next level struggling for me. Naturally the newborn season is hard for anybody. Parenting is hard for anybody. Literally, no one's exempt. But this, I'm worried. I'm getting worried about myself. If you are the husband and you feel worried about your wife, this is a time to advocate for her and be like, babe, let's maybe get some help. Let's maybe figure out a way. That is when we had to get our nanny. And I was like, I just was really struggling. And I think it was on very many levels. And so I would just encourage you. This is time to ask for help. Ask for help. Ask your husband for help. Ask your friends for help. Ask your mom and your dad for help. Ask anybody you have for help. This is when I started therapy, and it literally changed my life. Like, I can't even tell you, I don't even know how I got through most of my life without therapy at this point. It's become that crucial to literally every single week. Me and my friend, we see the same therapist, and we joke about how it literally feels like the wheels fall off of our lives the weeks that we like can't make it to therapy or a therapist is out of town, because it's become such a vital part of our emotional health and processing how we're doing, how we're feeling. Because oftentimes in therapy, I'm able to be like, okay, I'm able to make a decision and be like, okay, I'm going to need to take on another day of childcare. Okay, I want to start working again. Like, those were the times that I had space for myself to process really hard emotions and feelings. Even in our marriage, some of our hardest conversations came out of me coming out of a therapy session where my therapist is like, it's time to raise the white flag with Craig, ask for help for this, become explicit about what you need for these things. Like, and it literally changed our marriage. It transformed our marriage to where it's so, I can't even imagine going back to like those days before. We have such open communication now, and our feelings don't get hurt near as easily about things when we're like, hey, I need this. Or, it's just, we've come to this mutual understanding literally because of therapy and hard conversations, because we went from one kid to two. Like, honestly, that was like the launching pad for this, I feel like, new way of life that we have in our new marriage. Like, not in our new marriage, but like, it's almost like we have a new marriage in many ways. And I'm just, honestly, when I look back, so thankful that I was pushed to those limits, because I learned so much about myself. I learned so much about you. I learned so much about my upbringing and my past and trauma that I've been through. And it just honestly can be a transformative season. Like we were talking about even with Brittany. We talked with Brittany Bergman about this transformation that takes place if you will allow it to. And that is most certainly what happened when we went from one kid to two.
Yeah, it's so good. Even I think the illustration you started with of this experiencing of like, if you feel like you're drowning, it's probably because you are, and ask for help. It's like, going from one kid to two can often kind of raise the tide of the water some. But what I found for us is that when it became so visible, because it was like it got up to our eyeballs, it's like you realize that, I think I've already been like mostly underwater, but maybe I just didn't know it. There's things that are dragging you down that you could remove. And I think that's been my experience with like stress and anxiety is what caused me to go to therapy and realize like I started having panic attacks. And I started realizing like, oh, there's a mountain of stress and anxiety here that was here all along. It's just the panic attacks that created enough visibility for me to actually start dealing with it. And I think going from one kid to two can kind of be like that. Like maybe your life is maybe you're already overcommitted, or maybe you already don't have as effective of communication in your marriage as you want, or, maybe there's just what we all come from. We're all wounded and broken, from families of origins and living in this world that is a hard place to live in so many ways. And so I think there can be this positive experience of saying, I kind of want to raise my bar a little bit for what life should look like and create some new normals, and then set up rhythms to be able to go and start searching for those new normals. But for us, it was that experience of going from one kid to two that kind of got us a lot of visibility into maybe some things that were there all along.
Very much.
Which was a really positive experience.
Yeah. So Craig, what would you say is like the best practical tip you learned going from one to two?
Yeah, I get a similar picture. Kind of there, you get these kind of waves of chaos that happen that we still experience now. Just kids can be chaotic, and I have like a sensitivity to noise. That's maybe a little bit more so than most. And there's a lot of noise in our house often, and noise in life often with two kids, which is beautiful and fun. And so I try not to really even limit that if I can help it too much. But I think one of the main tips that I learned that's practical is just not attaching myself to those waves as much.
That's really good.
It's like, they can take you for a real ride if you like try to jump on it and try to wrestle it down to like calm.
Yes.
Like sometimes you just got to let the wave come and go and like kind of try to get under
and like
it.
Step out of the room or step out of the house and be like, I'm going to ride that out and let that just happen.
Absolutely. It's like if you can find a way to let it kind of go past you to where it doesn't, take you and move you too far, that's a positive experience. Even there are those times that, we'll be in the car or we're doing something and it's like, this is going to be chaos. We're going to a kid's birthday party and it's like, this is not an environment I would ever sign up to be at, but I need to be here and I want to be here. And I think as I experience that, it's like, okay, I'm signing up to kind of ride this chaos wave a little bit, but I'm not going to attach myself in the sense that this is now just my reality. It's like it's going to come and go and I can recover from this. And, I can, the waters will calm again. There will be a moment and kind of putting some hope in the future of that and just kind of normalizing that, there's ups and downs to this experience and chaos and peace and calm. And there's not, it's not possible to achieve just kind of this one level playing field, this one level of stimulation or whatever it is all the time. And like almost celebrating that by not necessarily, attaching every part of my life to those experiences that I might experience as negative in the moment, because they don't last, even though we know they'll come back again. Last thing I'd say about that is I think we've really been thinking a lot about this phrase or this concept that, even in relationships, we so often don't like rupture in relationships, but that life really is nothing more than a series of rupture and repair. And that rupture is inevitable. Inevitably, our kids are going to do something that hurts us, our feelings even. They have that ability, or in marriage that's going to happen or whatever. And going from 1 to 2, there can be these experiences of relationships that kind of have to change and develop over time. But recognizing that not as something to avoid, or the chaos as something to avoid, but saying, that there's experiences with that and we don't have to even try to limit it to the smallest amount possible. Sometimes you just got to let it come and go and acknowledge that actually is normal life. That's not something that's necessarily even wrong. That can be normal life and you can kind of ride those experiences as they come and go.
So as we wrap up, I just want to encourage parents going from 1 to 2 to just embrace it. Embrace the messiness, embrace the imperfection, and honestly, just get lost in love with your 2 little monkeys, and just embrace it for what it is. Like we said, ask for help, but also learn to just not get attached to the chaos and to give yourself space. And, as we talk about a lot at Christian Parenting, to just honestly drop the perfection. I think there's a lot of times that, with your new baby, there's space to make a lot of things go right and to feel like they're in the perfect little outfit or they're in the perfect sleep sack and their nap routine is, exactly what it should be, or the book tells you that it should be. And honestly, just encourage you to just embrace the chaos for what it is, because like Craig was saying, it's not going to last. And these are your little babes, and just soak it up. Soak up the sticky fingers. Soak up the tantrums, the goofiness of your 2-year-old trying to assert his dominance over you and the entire house, and just laugh at it. Laugh at what you can, cry hard about what you can, and feel the full depth of every part of this beautiful season of having multiple little ones.
Thanks so much for listening to today's podcast and this idea of going from 1 kid to 2 or 3 or 4, if you're in that category of people that I don't want you to talk to my wife. So glad that you're here. Genuinely know that Rachel and our hearts are for you, and that's why we're creating this content. And so if you have thoughts or questions, we'd love for you to leave a review on the podcast. We love to go through and read what you're experiencing from this content or experiencing in your parenting journey. So feel free to leave a comment or review in the podcast app. As always, follow us or subscribe to the podcast so that you can get notified as soon as we have a new episode that launches. And if you're looking for a resource, a more immersive resource to really be able to invite God into your parenting journey and connect as a couple to be on the same page to a greater depth in your parenting journey, you can always go to christianparenting.org and find our book, A Parent's Guide to a New Baby. We know that parenting a newborn is real hard, but we're here to help.